This was the moment that ReZero fully clicked for me. That's not to say I wasn't enjoying it prior. I absolutely was. I was crying like a little baby at this part. But here, in the heart of its third arc, is when its themes crystallized and the show revealed itself as something far more intelligent, introspective, and genre-defying than I was giving it credit for. It forced me to reevaluate everything that happened before under a new lens, and it made me realize that so many of the moments I thought were fluff were instead meticulously thought out and carefully planted threads. The first arc, with its much smaller scope, seems almost quaint in hindsight. Since the series feels like it evolved so much since its early beginnings, even a lot of die-hard ReZero fans underestimate how Natsuki Subaru's tumultuous first day is both well-constructed and crucial in setting the stage for what comes next. This can't happen without this. This video is an analysis of Arc 1, which consists of episodes 1 through 3, but I want to make it clear here and now what kind of analysis that will be. I'm focusing primarily on the writing. When people think of writing, they might think of how memorable the dialogue is, or how detailed the world building and lore is. It's not that ReZero is lacking any of that, but I'm more interested in the invisible ink of the narrative, to borrow the phrase from the Screenwriting book by McDonald. Invisible ink is the writing below the surface of the words. Most people will never see or notice it, but they will feel it. I've noticed that the invisible ink in Arc 1, the deeper structure, subtext, and thematic choices, often gets overlooked. So I'll be breaking down how ReZero's first arc excels in tight, economical storytelling, examining how well it characterizes its protagonist, establishes long-running themes, introduces a compelling story engine and a character arc to show it off, and includes a bunch of setups, payoffs, and foreshadowing that rewards close attention. Part 1. The Opening. ReZero's opening is far from flashy, but it's surprisingly layered and deliberate. Well-constructed prologues and openings of stories answer two critical questions. What is the tone, and what are the themes? Now, if I were to ask you what the first scene of ReZero is, you would probably say it's Natsuki Subaru's trip to the convenience store. But that's only half true. The very first thing we see is actually a flash forward, so I'm going to analyze that in its totality before moving on to Subaru's late-night snack run. The very first words in this flash-forward prologue are, "This is bad," and it depicts our injured protagonist lying on the floor, on the verge of death. This opening makes it clear up front that at its core, the series has a dark tone. It's a smart writing choice because it isn't long before we see Subaru partaking in comical fantasy shenanigans. But this opening effectively communicates to the audience that things are going to get serious. After all, the very first thing we see is death. ReZero is a series that constantly explores mortality, and we can glean that from its first minute alone. The sequence ends with him reaching out and then speaking words that echo throughout the entirety of the series. No matter what, I'm going to save you. Our first glimpse of the main character is seeing him dying, and despite his critical condition, still making a vow to save another person's life. This is what ReZero is. A series about being in a hopeless situation, but striving to push through against all odds, against your fated death, in order to save others. A dark tone with themes of mortality, determination, and heroism are front and center in this opening. Look at that, we know exactly what this story is about, and the episode barely even started. That's invisible ink right there. You may not have noticed it, but your brain did. The flash forward is cross-cut with Subaru's trip to the convenience store, and we get a sense of what our protagonist is like in a place of normalcy. Here we see him in full for the first time, and he's reading manga. This being Subaru's first introduction to us in the ordinary world is very intentional. It's small but important in establishing what we'll quickly find out is one of his major flaws. His understanding and expectations of the world are based around fiction. When he looks up, he sees a boy and a girl walking together and gives a depressed sigh. From this, we get the impression he's isolated and longs for human connection. That struggle to connect with others is an important theme that manifests in one way or another throughout every arc of the series. I'd even go as far as to say that the two he looks at are still in their school uniforms while Subaru isn't, which implies that his struggle to connect is related to a strange school life, something we don't even get confirmed until a whole season later. The parallel cutting between his boring shopping trip and the high-stakes flash-forward reinforces the banality of his life at the moment. It's quite clear that Subaru lives a boring life, one he's unsatisfied with. The toughest decision we see him make is what snacks to buy. It's only been 2 minutes, and here are the flaws we already know about our protagonist. He's consumed with fiction, he's single, lonely, and disconnected. He has a strained school life, and an uneventful life in general. When Subaru exits the store and appears in a fantasy world, for the first time we see light in his eyes, a strong visual indicator that Subaru sees this as an exciting opportunity compared to the uneventful life we just witnessed. It's up to the audience to be perceptive to all these things about him, many of which are only communicated visually. There's subtlety to it. I promise I won't go into this much detail with every individual scene here on out. I just wanted to showcase how effective and economical this opening is at conveying the tone, themes, and characterizing the protagonist in such a short amount of time. Part 2. Save the Cat. So, you want a complex protagonist who shows their ugly side. Maybe they're an anti-hero that does morally questionable things. Or maybe they're just very flawed. As a writer, you still have to make your audience care about them somehow. There has to be something admirable about them that people can latch onto early on. It's called a Save the Cat scene. As Blake Snyder explains in his book, conveniently titled Save the Cat, it's the scene where we meet the hero and the hero does something, like saving a cat, that defines who he is and makes us, the audience, like him. When we meet Subaru, there's a lot that's off-putting about him already. He seems self-centered, he's bumbling, impulsive, and often immature. A lot of the audience will agree with a certain someone in the next arc when she describes him as a profoundly irritating and aggravating man. That's why having Subaru help return a lost child to her parents isn't just some side quest diversion, but an integral part of the story structure and a character-defining moment. Even though he's hesitant to act until Amelia initiates, he shows he has a caring nature by intervening and being able to succeed in easing the child's nerves when Amelia couldn't. In fact, after a series of various blunders and wild goose chases, it's the only thing we see him actually successful with. That desire to help, even if he's sometimes reluctant or he's not doing it in the best way, crops up repeatedly throughout this arc. He helps Amelia, even when his obligation to do so is erased with the new timeline. He shows a lot of sympathy for Felt and Old Man Rom, despite them being the criminals who stole the insignia. He understands their connection and Felt's ambitions, and finds himself motivated to save their lives too. Subaru refers to helping the lost child as his one good deed a day, but in screenwriting terms, this is his save the cat moment, plain as day. It's a scene that goes a long way in helping the audience sympathize with him, and it showcases a childlike innocence and naivety to him that helps you root for him in an arc where there's a lot to be frustrated at him for otherwise. Part 3. The Story Engine. Subaru's first death at the hands of Elsa the Bowel Hunter and his subsequent restart set in motion what's referred to as the story engine of the series. To very much paraphrase Jacob Kruger of How to Write Your Screenplay, the story engine is a repeatable formula that allows writers to continuously produce new episodes or story arcs from a central premise. So, here's my take on what ReZero's story engine is. In a fantasy world, Natsuki Subaru is trapped in a cycle where he dies and restarts repeatedly, learning more information in each loop in order to progress. The cycle is broken when Subaru grows emotionally enough to overcome the obstacles he faces, and gains a greater understanding of the world around him. This is a great story engine because it's specific but malleable, and can be used to generate an endless stream of story arcs. Audiences watching can see the potential and wonder what different kinds of situations he'll find himself in, and how he'll get out of them. Let's see how that takes form in this particular arc. The main conflict here revolves around saving Amelia and recovering her stolen insignia, all while avoiding death at the hands of Elsa. The only way Subaru escapes this cycle is by changing 3 aspects of himself: his lack of courage, his impulsivity, and his egocentrism. Courage is the most straightforward because pretty much every protagonist has to undergo this to some extent. When negotiations fall through with Elsa, Subaru waits until everyone else dies before he stands up to face her. He even briefly considers abandoning everything upon reset since he technically wasn't involved anymore. By the final loop, however, he takes initiative and fights to help protect the others. Subaru gets into a lot of issues because of his impulsivity. I mean, this is the guy who rushes into the same thug-filled alley multiple times in a row. He has no strategy, whether that's with bartering or attacking an opponent. He gains the upper hand by becoming less impulsive, and instead using the knowledge he learned throughout his loops to make more informed choices. He learns how to successfully negotiate to get Felt on his side, and he makes note of Elsa's attack pattern and her second blade, and uses that knowledge to warn the others and defend against her strikes. Lastly, that brings us to ego. Subaru begins this arc acting like he's the protagonist in a game or manga. He wants to be a hero who saves the day and arrogantly expects everything to revolve around him. But after dying several times, he ends up calling out for help and receives it via Reinhard. This seems small, but his call for help is what ends up breaking the cycle, as Reinhard is the one who ultimately defeats Elsa. He has to shed his sense of pride and be willing to receive help from others. This is what the emotional crux of Season 2 is all about, and we're already seeing it here, albeit in a much less overt way. He goes from trying to take on the issue on his own to taking part in a team effort. It's a microcosm of his larger arc. That's the point of showing that Amelia arrives faster to the loot house on her own, without Subaru's involvement. Subaru must learn that he isn't the center of the universe. There's some really great symbolism that reinforces this too. The very first shot of the episode is through Subaru's own eyes, and the very last shot is him reflected in someone else's. Of course, this is only the first arc, so he doesn't grow too much. But that's a good thing. We don't want all of his character flaws to be resolved right now. Then we wouldn't have a series. Arc 1 takes us for a great trial run to show what the story engine is capable of doing, and we as the audience will keep tuning in because of the potential it offers. Part 4: Setups, Payoffs, and Foreshadowing. One of the most satisfying things about Arc 1 is just how tightly it's written. Nearly everything that's introduced has a purpose, with many paying off in this arc alone, and others are seeds that come to fruition later in the series. Let's go all the way back to the opening, because even though I talked about it for so long, there's still something I left out. While checking out at the register, Subaru opens his wallet to find a jagged edge 10 yen coin. It's a seemingly irrelevant detail, until later in the episode, when he pulls out that very coin to perform a magic trick with it and earn the lost child's trust. It may be a small beat, but that's another thing that the intro set up. Helping the lost child ends up having a payoff too, which is also the payoff to Subaru's interactions with the fruit seller. That's double the payoff. Subaru's cell phone is at first used in a minor gag where he can't get a signal, showing how useless his items are. But later, he uses it in negotiations for the insignia when Felt and Old Man Rom misconstrue it as a Mitya. But this isn't where it ends for Subaru's phone either, because Subaru's phone is a big old Chekhov's gun. Chekhov's gun is a simple writing principle. If you put a gun on stage in Act 1, you must use it by Act 3. Or, in the case of ReZero, if you show a phone in Arc 1, you must use it to stop a magical flying whale in Arc 3. Not only that, but its appraisal as a Mitya specifically comes back too, when Subaru uses that appraisal from Felt and Old Man Rom to convince the Krush camp and her allies to believe him. Now that is some good planning. To continue on that thread, Arc 1 quite cleverly foreshadows future events and reveals. Maybe the most obvious examples are all the little tidbits we get regarding Satella. Both Old Man Rom and Reinhardt take note of how unique a descriptor silver hair is when Subaru mentions it, and Felt has a questionable reaction to Amelia's appearance. A whole season later, we see that Amelia and the Witch of Envy share the exact same appearance. All the way here in the first arc, we're getting hints at one of the deepest mysteries in the entire series. There's also a lot of the smaller details you may have missed. Amelia says the word dunderhead, which Subaru notes feels very old school. And despite being the same age, she thinks Subaru is younger than her. While on surface level, it's a joke about Subaru's immaturity, this doubles as some subtle foreshadowing that Amelia is a lot older than she looks, when it's revealed at the end of Season 2 that she was frozen in ice for a century. After scaring off the thugs, Reinhardt makes a comment to Subaru about how he feels like he doesn't live up to his family's expectations. They even show us Subaru's reaction to that piece of information specifically. A season later, we find out this is exactly what Subaru struggled with too. What a great little hint this was. And a season after that, this line becomes relevant with the Estrella family plotline. He also remarks that his sword can only be drawn against those it deems worthy, another setup to make the moment he draws it against his grandmother Teresia more impactful. Elsa continuing after she got part of her foot ripped off, and her survival against Reinhardt attack isn't just rule of cool anime logic. It's foreshadowing that she has regeneration powers, which we learn in Season 2. There's also the insignia lighting up in Felt's hands, prompting Reinhardt to ask for her family name and age. We later find out there was a missing member of the royal family, and with that in mind, it's clear he's checking to see if she matches that description. Revisiting Arc 1 makes you appreciate how meticulously planned everything is. I get the sense that there's even more hidden in plain sight that we won't know the full extent of until it's over. Part 5. Weaknesses. Before I wrap things up, I'd like to list out what I perceive as the weaknesses of the arc. If Arc 1 has all this stuff to sink your teeth into, then why is it so rarely discussed? What is it missing compared to later arcs? First and foremost, there's a lack of shocking twists and revelations. Arc 1 is quite subdued, with maybe the biggest shocking moment being Subaru's first reset. And that's only if you went in blind without knowing the premise. Think about it this way, it's immediately followed up with Arc 2, which has the reveal of Rem being a killer, and the reveal of her being a demon. Arc 3 and 4 are jam-packed with so many crazy moments and reveals it's too much to even list. Arc 1, by comparison, plays things relatively safe. It also lacks many of the big emotional payoffs that become series staples. Subaru, Rem, Beatrice, Amelia, and many of the supporting characters undergo powerful emotional transformations, and we don't really get any glimpse of that in this first arc. Then there's the antagonist. Elsa is characterized as a mercenary with a perverse attraction to cutting open entrails, and beyond that, not much else. She has two big knives, and while we'd all love to play with Elsa's big knives, there's not a whole lot of deeper characterization present. We get to see more of her depth when she returns a season later, but even then, she's more of a physical threat than a psychological or thematic one. For Subaru at least. Contrast that with Rem in the very next arc. She's a brutal obstacle for Subaru's survival too, but is far more multifaceted, and has a compelling backstory that motivates her suspicion of him. Betelgeuse reflects Subaru's own worst tendencies in Arc 3. Roswaal and Echidna have interesting philosophies that challenge Subaru's in Season 2. And the rest of the Sin Archbishops in Season 3 are so full of personality and eccentricities. Elsa compared to the other antagonists in ReZero feels pretty lackluster. Conclusion. Arc 1 serves as a great introduction because of how well it sets up Subaru's journey and the larger themes of the story, but many of its strengths are written in invisible ink, things you only recognize in retrospect, once later arcs give you the context to fully appreciate them. Arc 1 is probably not anyone's favorite, but it's very well constructed and successfully lays the groundwork for everything that follows. I hope this video helped you understand and appreciate Arc 1 just a little bit more. Or if you already loved it, I hope you enjoyed seeing it analyzed like this. I'm brainstorming other ReZero videos I could do in the lead up to Season 4, so if you'd like to see a breakdown like this on Arc 2, let me know. I'm open to all sorts of suggestions, so tell me what you'd like to see next. Live strong, okay?